Greetings and good afternoon, WPA. My name is Daniel Ignacio, and I am the Certified Brain Injury Specialist at St. Jude Medical Center's Brain Injury Network. I am also the elected Vice Chairman for the Traumatic Brain Injury Advisory Board for the Department of Rehabilitation in the state of California. I'm also the current Director of the HI CARES Lab, which stands for Head Injury Community Advocacy through Research, Education, and Statistics. So we are a student-driven research advocacy lab in collaboration with St. Jude's Brain Injury Network and California State University Fullerton. And yes, I too am a student. So I'm a fourth-year PhD student in clinical psychology with a concentration in neuropsychology at Fielding University. So today we have prepared 4 talks for you to introduce traumatic brain injury, or TBI, which can occur from a blunt force trauma, such as motor vehicle accidents, falls, or even things like concussions. So these are things like sports or other recreational activity, cycling or skateboarding, for example. So these talks will provide existing definitions of brain injury. They will delineate the expected symptoms and the problems, provide potential treatments and solutions for those problems, ranging from hospital stay to subacute to post-acute to community reintegration and beyond. Right, so then we will be discussing the current socio-political climate of TBI public policy as it relates to mental health, right? And so, yes, cognition does fall within the auspices or purview of mental health. So moreover, there are even stronger associations between brain injury and functional outcomes, things like homelessness, suicidal ideation, right? Incarceration, and so in jails and prisons, right? And the rates are even higher for females than it is for males. Finally, we will conclude with the current developments and upcoming innovations in the understanding and in the treatment and management of TBI. So without further, we hope that our compilation will be enlightening for clinicians, students, and budding psychologists alike in the screening of head trauma, the identification of brain injury sequelae, and in the collaborative formulation of treatment targets with survivors who you may encounter as service providers. I give you HI CARES.
Hi, my name is Sonali Bargosha.
And my name is Kiana Clay, and we will be discussing brain injury definitions and symptoms.
So, brain injuries are simply injuries that are caused by an external force that disrupts normal brain functioning. They're split into 2 different categories. So congenital brain injuries are injuries that are present at birth and usually caused by genetic factors, and acquired brain injuries, which are sustained after birth and caused by things like strokes, insufficient oxygen levels to the brain, infections, etc. Traumatic brain injury, or TBI, is a type of acquired brain injury that's caused by a sudden forceful impact to the head. Concussions are a type of TBI that are currently one of the most frequently occurring neurological disorders. As of 2015, the number of TBI cases in the United States was estimated to be about 3.5 million individuals within the civilian population alone. So categorizing and classifying TBI symptoms and severity has been challenging because there's different standards between the medical and the mental health field. Symptoms typically span cognitive, emotional, and physical domains, and it implicates different structures such as the cingulate gyrus, the basal ganglia, and the thalamus. These areas, usually damaged by brain injuries, are involved in a lot of dopaminergic and serotonin pathways. As a result, brain connectivity is disrupted, and instead of the brain being able to directly communicate with another area of the brain, it has to take lengthier detours in order to communicate, and that takes up more cognitive gas and causes things like cognitive fatigue. So as I mentioned, the categorization of TBI isn't standardized between the medical and mental health field. In the medical field, they classify severity using the terms mild, moderate, and severe TBI. The severity is determined using factors such as the duration of time that they were unconscious for after the accident, their score on a Glasgow Coma Scale, as well as the length of post-traumatic amnesia they experience after the accident. The mental health field uses the DSM-5, which uses the terms mild versus major neurocognitive disorder to categorize TBI severity and the symptoms. They take into account affective disturbances such as depression, anxiety, stress, fatigue, aggression, suicidal ideation, frustration difficulties, as well as language and social difficulties and cognitive impairments in areas like attention, memory, and executive functioning.
We will now be discussing the symptoms of TBI and how to identify them. So parents, guardians, and athletic coaches report that children with TBI present with the following symptoms. These can include appearing dazed and confused, forgetting instructions, loss of consciousness, and post-traumatic amnesia, also known as PTA. And survivors of TBI report feeling hypersensitivity to either light and sound, confusion, or balance problems, dizziness, and blurry vision. During athletic competition, if an athlete presents with any of the following symptoms, they should be removed from play immediately and evaluated by a provider, especially if they experience loss of consciousness for any amount of time or cannot recall events before or after the initial impact, also known as post-traumatic amnesia. So TBI can affect different parts of the brain, one being the anterior cingulate gyrus. It is implicated in conflict-related task performance and is susceptible to TBI injury due to its frontal location. Problems with the anterior cingulate gyrus can include psychological inflexibility, trouble set shifting, being argumentative, and some of the associated conditions are OCD, PTSD, chronic pain, and oppositional defiant disorder, which is often present in children who are in juvenile hall. The basal ganglia can also be affected by TBI. It is primarily responsible for motor control and other roles such as motor learning, executive functions, behaviors, and emotions. And when there are problems with the basal ganglia, survivors may experience problems with emotional regulation, anxiety and panic, conflict avoidance, and associated conditions include anxiety, OCD, and Tourette's. The thalamus is another part of the brain that may be affected by TBI. It lies just above the brainstem, and one of its main processes is controlling the regulation of consciousness and sleep. It also acts as a bridge between the primary motor cortex and the cerebellum, playing a crucial role in muscular movement. Problems with the thalamus may cause depression, guilt, problems with sleep and isolation, and associated conditions include depression, cyclic mood disorders, and pain syndromes. So TBI survivors can experience a range of symptoms, and these symptoms may be cognitive, emotional, or physical in nature. Examples of cognitive sequelae include issues with executive functioning, problems with memory, time management, and regulating their behavior. Affective sequelae may include irritability, sadness, feeling easily upset, and experiencing mood swings. So TBI survivors that present with depression may experience sleep disturbance, fatigue, cognitive impairment, changes in appetite, and apathy. This was a study done by Siddiqui and his colleagues, published in 2020, and what they found was that survivors with TBI and those without TBI actually presented with depression differently. So these are ways to reduce affective sequelae. They include things like allowing a survivor to take a time out, allowing to remove themselves from a situation, speak with a responsible and trusted adult, and understanding that their mental fatigue may cause emotional meltdowns, especially younger children or adolescents. A wide range of neuropsychiatric symptoms can also be found in the TBI population. These may include pseudo-bulbar affect, social comportment disorder, and behavioral disinhibition. They may also include mood disorders, emotional dysregulation, and anxiety disorders. Physical sequelae may include the following. Some important to note is this acronym FAST, which stands for face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty, and these are all signs of stroke. If someone who has TBI presents with any of these, it would be advised to call emergency services immediately. The T is for time there. They may also experience nausea, fatigue, and tandem gait, which is walking in a straight line, or the ability to walk in a straight line with one foot in front of the other, so heel to toe. If they cannot do that, they may also be a symptom. These are strategies to reduce physical sequelae. They include being removed from all physical activity, taking time to rest, and being in a quiet environment and having less light, and that can be accomplished by wearing sunglasses either inside or outside.
Hello, my name is Juliana Fernandez.
And my name is Kiana Clay, and we will be discussing psychological treatments from hospital to community.
So there are multiple models which can be used to help survivors of TBI. The first being the medical model. The medical model is unidirectional in that people are to be treated so that they may adjust back into society, but it doesn't really consider how society may need to change and adjust to people. The World Health Organization developed community-based rehabilitation as an extension of the medical model that incorporated a variety of social resources and reintegration efforts, but it doesn't really focus on neuropsychological disabilities. So there are two different models for neurorehabilitation models, the learn to participate model and the participate to learn model. Both follow the community-based neuropsychological rehabilitation, which is proposed to treat community-based survivors. So for example, individual and group cognitive rehabilitation, psychological assessments, and we think this could be a great integration to the medical model and are in no way suggesting that it should replace it. Now, according to Maslow's standard hierarchy of needs, in order for someone to reach self-actualization, they must first meet all of these bottom needs here first. So physiological and safety. So in order for a survivor of TBI to reach their new highest potential, they must first make sure they have food, sleep well. Then after that, they they need to have safety. So this could include a home, money, security. After that, they can work on their relationships and feeling of belongingness. Now, in order for the first needs to be met, we need to make sure they have adequate housing. There are multiple housing models that can help people find a place to live, as well as help with case management. Financial resources include Social Security, health policy. There are some legal cases. For example, the Chris Wilson case was a case where this individual suffered a hypoxic brain injury. He was able to increase his impairment ratings due to a catastrophic impairment due to psychological impairment. So if you'd like to learn more about this case, you can visit the TBI OC website. Furthermore, the Department of Healthcare Services offers different waivers, which include the following. So first we have the home and community-based alternatives, or HCBA waiver, and you can get long-term services through this waiver. So the home community-based service, if someone got a brain injury prior to age 22, then they are eligible for the HCBS waiver. So you would fit a developmental disability. Cal Optima also has other community-based services, which include things like physical therapy and occupational therapy. And in order for someone to be eligible, they must meet these criteria right over here. So you must be enrolled in Cal Optima, 18 years or older, meet nursing facility A level of care or above, and have a mild, moderate, or severe cognitive disorder. Something else that might help is seeing a neuro-optometrist. Some survivors of TBI will experience vision problems, but it's not just a vision problem. Instead, what happens is that there is a disconnect between the eyes and the brain, so they don't communicate like they used to before. And seeing a neuro-optometrist may be beneficial for them. Goodwill also has a program in which they offer assistive technology to people who need them. Again, if you are interested in that, you can go ahead and email us. We are also currently developing a program where we incorporate music therapy to help with the sequela of TBIs. So if you're interested, the email to contact is right over here. So daniel.ignacio@stjoe.org. We also offer support groups every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now the HI CARES lab, which is the lab that Kiana and I are in, this lab also conducts assessments and reports for survivors of TBI completely free of charge. We run clinical TBI screeners, psychological assessments, and cognitive measurements. Our reports have advocated for services to medical providers as well as insurance and have also been used in court proceedings. Now, the OSU TBI ID is a measure designed to be administered as a clinical interview. It assesses for any strikes or blows to the head in a patient's lifetime, whether there was any loss of memory and loss or alteration of consciousness. Then it also asks whether there was a period in time when the patient experienced repeated impacts to the head. These could be in time in military, history of abuse, or sport related. Next, we have the BISQ, which is a brain injury screening questionnaire from Mount Sinai in New York by Dr. Wayne Gordon, and it has 3 parts to it. The first part is designed to determine whether the patient may have had a TBI before. Part 2 asks about difficulties in daily living that people with brain injuries may experience. And part 3 asks additional questions about personal history, such as birth conditions or medications. Then we have the acute concussion evaluation by the CDC, which is a fairly quick measure to administer. It assesses for injury characteristics, physical, cognitive, emotional, and sleep symptoms, as well as assesses risk factors that may become complicating factors in the recovery process. Next up, we have the functional independence measure and functional assessment measure, which is designed to assess a patient's physical cognitive functioning physical and cognitive functioning that may be informed by the MMSE. It's used in New York, Ohio, Colorado, and it's not officially used here in California, but we do use it. If you ever want to assess whether someone has had a TBI, the research director at Craig Hospital suggests you ask these 3 questions. So, were you ever knocked out or did you lose consciousness? What was the longest time that you were knocked out or lost consciousness? And how were you the first time that you were, how old were you the first time you were knocked out or lost consciousness? Now, the mini mental status examination is a scale that measures a patient's cognitive functioning. It assesses things such as their orientation, attention, recall abilities, and language abilities. Then we also have Brain Check, which is filled with online neuropsychological assessments. Of course, early detection is preferred, but it contains cognitive assessments and clinical decision support, which we use to help come up with an individual care plan. So some examples of what Brain Check includes are measuring immediate and delayed recall. Then we have trails A and B, the digit symbol substitution, and Stroop effect aimed at measuring executive functions. We use all these tests to assess multiple domains in a matter of minutes. So we're able to assess for attention, information processing, memory, and executive functions, which are important for making treatment plans to help a patient's future.
So the recovery algorithm or the formula is to define and identify the problem, measure and assess, and then compensate and accommodate. So this is an additional resource. This is OMED Institute located in Irvine, California. Their website is present on the screen, www.omedinstitute.org. They provide cognitive therapy and counseling for survivors of traumatic brain injury, along with neuropsychology assessments. Neuropsychology assessments include assessments for language, attention, visual, motor, and executive functions. There are two models of neuropsychological rehabilitation: compensatory and restorative. The compensatory approach is centered on teaching survivors ways to bypass or compensate for impaired cognitive functioning as a result of TBI. This approach emphasizes the use of assistive technologies such as calendars, alarms, or reminders. CogSmart is a training program that applies the compensatory approach. And the restorative approach is centered on reinforcing, strengthening, and restoring impaired cognitive skills. This also includes repeated exercises targeting specific cognitive domains, and the exercises are meant to increase in difficulty over time. So, neuropsychological rehabilitation. So in this image, you can see a white circle, and that is a sign of brain inactivity. So in order to compensate for this brain inactivity, we can create new pathways in the brain using neuropsychological rehabilitation. So some of the ways that can accommodate for cognitive impairment are what you see on the screen here. And reducing the cognitive load can be completed using these tasks, and all of these have been combined in a cognitive rehabilitation course developed by Daniel Ignacio, offered at St. Jude Brain Injury Network. So through training, we can recalibrate the pathways in the brain to compensate for deficits. Many of the skills that we recommend are used daily by successful people, those who have traumatic brain injuries. And the more that these skills are practiced, the more they become automatic, creating plasticity. So without the right support, TBI can become a chronic condition that includes emotional, cognitive, and physical domains that may not be obvious. TBI is often known as an invisible disorder, and these symptoms can manifest in poor public health outcomes such as unemployment, substance abuse, homelessness, incarceration, and suicide. So one source of support is the class I mentioned before, the cognitive rehabilitation course. This program or this class combines both compensatory and restorative approaches. This is our flyer for our spring class. This will be offered again in the fall. If you are interested, please email daniel.ignacio@stjoe.org. Another source of support are the caregivers. They are very important to our survivors' recovery. And 57,000 people per year do not survive their TBI. So that is 57,000 families affected. So TBI does not only affect the survivor, but also their families. And we are working to enhance resources for them as well as survivors. So looking into the future, this is one study being completed to better understand TBI. They assess survivors every 6 months for 2 years, and you receive a neuropsych report, an EEG, an MRI, a blood panel, and are paid $50 each time you show up. Looking into the future also includes restructuring at the legislative level. These are mental health considerations. And thinking of those breakfast questions, the first thing that should be known is if there is a history of head injury. We want to stop creating exclusive groups when it comes to brain injury and mental health. Veterans, homeless, and incarcerated individuals are estimated to have brain injury. And the California Department of Rehabilitation has established a TBI advisory board, which includes Dr. Chain from Sacramento and Dr. Omalu, who discovered CTE and fought the NFL to begin a concussion revolution. They both serve on the advisory board with Daniel Ignacio, and the rest of the board is made up of physicians. There are 13 individuals on the board, and the goals of the TBI Advisory Board are to establish secure funding, a TBI statewide registry, and assess the needs of the TBI community.
So thank you very much. This was our presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sonali, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the current social, cultural, and public health climate as it relates to traumatic brain injury. The treatment of traumatic brain injury has improved over the past couple of years. However, given the prevalence of TBI, the issue would be more effectively and successfully handled by incorporating public policy changes. There are 3.5 million civilian cases of TBI in the United States, and in California, 73% of cases are just treat and release, meaning that individuals are treated for their immediate symptoms and then released from care. After being discharged, TBI survivors are susceptible to being mismanaged, especially if they don't have integrative support to help them adjust to their condition and new limitations. Also, since TBI has significant cognitive, emotional, and physical disability involved, family members are also often greatly affected by the occurrence of a traumatic brain injury as well. Things like home assistance, respite care, support groups, and other community resources may go a long way in relieving the stress for families, caregivers, as well as the survivors themselves. The only problem is that most people are generally unaware of these resources and how to access them. So implementing some sort of referral-based system for survivors may be beneficial to help them navigate and identify rehabilitation resources that based on their individual needs after being discharged. Another immediate community issue that could be better addressed through TBI public policy changes would be the homeless population. California has the highest rate of homelessness in the United States. 53% of the homeless population self-reports having a TBI, and an estimated 70% of those individuals report having sustained their injuries prior to becoming homeless. Currently, there are, in the future, some things to consider to improve public policy surrounding TBI would be to include the identification of biomarkers to improve accuracy and the understanding of the clinical significance of these markers. Also incorporating the model of community-based neuropsychological rehabilitation to ensure that people are in an environment that's most conducive to their recovery. Legislative actions may involve rethinking competencies and incorporating TBI screeners wherever appropriate, as well as utilizing the California Department of Rehabilitation's TBI Advisory Board, ensuring they have adequate funding to establish a state registry and assess the needs of the TBI community. Currently, there are 3 new public policy changes that took effect in California in January 1st of 2021. The first one is AB 2265. The Mental Health Services Act provides a fund that is continuously appropriated to and administered by the state department's healthcare services to fund county mental health plans for services that are specified by the county. This bill also authorizes the continued use of these funds to treat people with co-occurring mental illnesses and substance use disorders, recognizing them as interconnected rather than separate. This bill also extends the use of prevention and early intervention programs provided under this fund to include substance use disorder treatment for children and adults who are eligible as per the program. It also allows for the collection and publication of this data on the internet for the number of people being assessed for mental illness, substance use disorder, or both. And lastly, it allows for the reimbursement of local agencies and school districts for certain costs and imposes state mandated local programs. The next policy is the SB 855. It promotes mental health parity, requires insurance companies to cover all medically necessary mental health care and substance use disorder treatment, and not just emergency crisis care. Insurers were only required to cover emergency mental health services, and this bill would expand that requirement to fund all medically necessary mental health and substance use disorder treatments, regardless of its urgency. The goal is to avoid the need for crisis care by providing mental health care before a crisis occurs rather than after. Formerly, insurance companies were only required to cover 9 pre-listed severe mental illnesses that failed to effectively encompass the range of mental health and substance use disorder issues that were experienced by people. It also establishes 8 requirements for acceptable standards of mental health care. And the last policy is the SB 803. And this one establishes a statewide certification program for peer support specialists to create uniformity in their education and training standards. The peer services would also be eligible for federal reimbursement from Medicare and Medi-Cal. It allows federal dollars to be drawn for any county that chooses to opt into the program. Counties can choose whether or not to opt into these programs to provide certified peer support specialists services to the area. And the program outlines a range of responsibilities, practice guidelines, required training, ethical standards, and education standards for these peer support specialists. It also allows peer support specialists to practice in any county in the state as opposed to just the county that they were certified in. And these 3 progressive bills lay the groundwork for mental health services, whereas in the past, cognitive concerns may have been overlooked. Now they can be included under the realm of mental health in order to benefit from the services that are provided under these policies.
Hello, my name is Dylan Serpis, and I am going to be talking about the 4th talk in the symposium on TBI, the silent epidemic. This talk is on future directions and innovations in TBI treatment, specifically in the context of community-dwelling TBI survivors. So without further ado. So the 5 potential future treatment directions for diagnosing, treating, and community reintegrating TBI survivors are going to include the following. And I will be reporting on the first couple. I'll be reporting on the brain trauma blueprint and the rapid DX, or the use of biomarkers. And the co-author, Daniel Ignacio, will be reporting on the remaining 3. So first, what's this brain trauma blueprint? So as we know, there are significant problems in TBI. It affects a wide array of individuals and not just veterans and pro athletes who sustain injuries on the job or in combat. Actually disproportionately affects individuals who are just like you and I, community dwelling survivors. As we have seen, car accidents and falls are the leading causes of TBI within the United States. So clearly, just regular old civilians are being disproportionately affected by traumatic brain injury. So essentially, this brain trauma blueprint is this idea that there is now a roadmap that aims to advance the precision therapeutics for TBI. So essentially, at the stakeholder and policy level, this organization, the Brain Trauma Blueprint, is going to aim to survey the current scientific knowledge, identify significant gaps in our understanding so that we can develop new models of treatment and rehabilitation to better inform where we want to allocate funding and how we want to go about treating TBI. So essentially, it's a very evidence-based approach, which is absolutely phenomenal and holds a lot of promise for enhancing the health equity. Because as we know, compared to other CNS disorders, TBI is miles behind in terms of treatment and rehabilitation efforts. There's very little standardization of care practices that are provided for TBI. And this is a huge initiative that is going to be going in that right direction. Now, one caveat is that all of the directions that we're reporting on right now are actually all in the context of PTSD and trauma combat related survivors. So all of these efforts are geared towards that population, and hopefully shortly after, it will begin to trickle down and be able to benefit community dwelling survivors. But right now, a lot of these efforts and all of these financial opportunities are being driven towards VA systems and veteran populations. While important, they're not the only group of survivors, clearly. Now, the next one, really fascinating, is the use of biomarkers. So this company, RapidDX, which is the Research Alliance for PTSD and TBI Innovation and Discovery Diagnostics, is spearheading this initiative to find biomarkers that can diagnose TBI. So as we know, TBI diagnosis is completely subjective. It's based on one's recall of their events and symptoms, whether it's from the individual themselves or from family members or from healthcare providers using a triangulation system of a symptom for diagnosis. And we also rely on objective measures of neurocognitive assessment and so forth, but a lot of it is still paper and pencil or just subjective reports. So at the biological basis, what if there was a test where you could provide, some sort of biomarker like salivary amylase, or blood? If there was some sort of biomarker in the blood that could indicate an individual has sustained a TBI. Now, again, this initiative is within the context of veterans and PTSD and trauma survivors, individuals who were in combat, but in the context of community dwelling survivors, this could be very beneficial for, potentially individuals who sustained a pediatric TBI, or they sustained a head injury as an adolescent, some sort of adverse childhood experience. And now as an adult, they are experiencing neuropsychiatric difficulty and they don't know why. And maybe it was that now the TBI from experience from during their childhood is now creating adulthood issues for them. And so, allowing us to have this diagnostic capability at the biomarker level could be really beneficial. And this is one really important stride that that RapidDX is aiming to contribute to the scientific field. So that concludes my portion. And also on both of these slides, I did provide a hyperlink below at the bottom of the slide if you are interested in learning more. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dylan. So as he was discussing, I'm going to talk about the last three initiatives that he had opened up with. First one being Normative Neuroimaging Library. So this is going to take thousands of healthy neurotypical adult volunteers, and it's going to take their MRIs and put them into a library or a database so that for individuals or adults who have some sort of trauma, neurotrauma, they can assess their MRIs to a wide range of individuals who are otherwise considered neurotypical. And so the purpose of getting so many MRIs and putting them in a library basically is to give you a range of what type of variability in that neuroimaging would be expected in a healthy individual, so that we can increase sensitivity and decrease the amount of false positives or anything like that. The second initiative that I'm going to discuss is the neurotrauma results null hypothesis. And so this is essentially a platform where researchers are taking all of the not published research that didn't find significance, that did not find what they expected to in the research hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, and what they really did was they supported the null hypothesis, meaning there was no difference. And so instead of getting filed into a drawer, file drawer somewhere, and never seeing the light of day again, this initiative is taking all of these neurotrauma null results and placing them into also another library or database. The third and final kind of initiative that we're going to end with today is called the Brain Commons. And so this is basically taking data analytics and approaching it from a different perspective, right? So instead of using summaries of data of single published paper after single published paper, Data Commons has, along with the lines of the work of FITBIR, which is the Federal Interagency TBI Research Informatics System, or FITBIR. And what they're trying to do here is create also another database where it is almost like a living, breathing database of information that's coming in from all different points across the country. And so the point of this is that you're not getting just a single snapshot, like one published paper, this published paper, one published paper, and then the data kind of gets lost or gets summarized or aggregated. And then once it's aggregated, it doesn't get de-aggregated so for further analysis. What the FITBIR, the Federal Interagency TBI Research Informatics System, is looking towards to do is basically create a living, breathing repository where data is constantly in flux, so that at any point, at any given time, a researcher, should they be interested, go in and assess or analyze the data as it's coming in. So it's not using recycling stale data, basically. So in this way, the normative neuroimaging library, that database, the neurotrauma null hypothesis database, and the Brain Commons FITBIR database, these are all libraries that are projected to improve some of the shortcomings of current research methodologies as we know them. And so to not only just advance science as we know it, but also advance our understanding and our management and the treatment of traumatic brain injury survivors and their families. So again, thank you very much for sitting into our symposia today. HI CARES, thank you very much. Dylan Serpis, Juliana Fernandez, Sonali Bargotra, Kiana Clay, fantastic, wonderful, and it's been a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon, and I wish you all the very best in your academic endeavors. So best regards and have a fantastic day.